Hi, it's Rose. And I'll never forget the moment I read the message. You're not invited to the family dinner. Only my wife's family will be there. That was it. No explanation, no apology. Just a text from my son, my only son, delivered like a slap on a quiet Tuesday morning while I was folding laundry in the den. I stared at the screen for a long time, the phone heavy in my palm. My tea had gone cold on the side table. Outside, the sun was shining through the curtains, making everything in the house glow golden and soft. But inside me, something sharp and ugly had just cracked. Part 1. The hook. I didn't cry. Not at first. I reread the message again, hoping there had been some mistake, some missing context, something that would make it less cruel. But the words stayed the same. Brutal in their simplicity. You're not invited. Only her family will be there. As if I were a stranger. As if I hadn't been the one who raised him, who sat beside his hospital bed when he had pneumonia at 6, who clipped coupons and skipped meals so he could go on the 8th grade field trip. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt empty. I remember putting the phone down slowly as if it were made of glass. I walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and stared inside, forgetting why I'd come. They were hosting a family dinner. A family dinner. And somehow I wasn't family anymore. For years I had played my part. Smiling through Rachel's sharp-edged comments, biting my tongue when she corrected me in front of the children, pretending not to notice when she rolled her eyes as I spoke. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to make trouble. Because I thought love eventually would soften her. I was wrong. It was a dinner for her side. Her family. Her mother with the glossy hair and expensive perfume. Her father with the firm handshake and the disapproving eyes. Her sister who always called me Marcia instead of Martha even after 10 years. I was never one of them. And now, I wasn't even one of my own. I sat down at the kitchen table, hands folded tightly in my lap, my heart thudding like a slow, tired drum. This wasn't the first slight, it wasn't even the worst, but something about the casualness of it, the way it was delivered without ceremony or care, made it final. They weren't just excluding me, they were erasing me. I thought about calling him, about asking why, about reminding him of everything I had done, everything I had given, everything I had been. But something in me stopped. Instead, I walked down the hallway to the guest bedroom, the one I used to call his room back when he was little. It still smelled faintly of cedar and childhood. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the drawer in the nightstand. Inside was the journal I'd started 6 months ago. A quiet project. A list, really. A way to keep track of the small sacrifices I made, the favors, the money transfers, the errands, the last-minute babysitting. 118 entries so far. I opened to the most recent page and added one more line. 119. Not invited to dinner. I closed the book gently, my fingers resting on the cover. Then I stood, went to the hall closet, and pulled down the old wooden box from the top shelf. Inside were all the bank statements, all the receipts. The truth, in black and white. If they wanted to pretend I wasn't part of the family, fine. But I wasn't going to fund their comfort while they turned me into a ghost. I had been kind. I had been patient. I had been understanding. But now I was done being quiet. And I had no idea what would happen next. But I was finally ready to find out. I didn't cancel anything right away. No, I'm not that impulsive. Instead, I sat with it, with the message, with the echo of it in my head as I went about my day. Only her family will be there. It played like a drumbeat in the background, steady and cruel, while I made tea, while I trimmed the hydrangeas, while I scrubbed the stove and tried to pretend that my heart wasn't quietly collapsing in on itself. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. What was I going to say? That my son, my baby boy, who used to beg me to braid his hair when he was little, who used to sleep curled up against me during thunderstorms, had drawn a line in the sand and placed me on the outside of it? It would sound petty if I said it aloud. Small. Petulant. But it wasn't about a dinner. It wasn't even about Rachel. It was about being slowly pushed to the margins of a life I helped build. about being useful but never wanted, needed but never respected. A quiet background figure who brought cookies and paid for piano lessons and smiled through the slights. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting the ceiling fan blades like rosary beads. Around 3 a.m., I got up, made myself a cup of chamomile, and pulled out the folder. The real folder. Not the journal with the list. That was emotional, sentimental. This folder was practical. The cold, neat financial reality of my place in their lives. Mortgage cosigner, me. Private school tuition, me. Rachel's business loan, me. The down payment on their second car, also me. Grocery delivery subscription, me. Streaming services, insurance, even their Christmas bonus last year when they said things were tight. All me. The total stared back at me like a stranger's face. Nearly $60,000 in the last 3 years alone. And yet, I wasn't invited to dinner. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that they felt entitled to it, that they'd come to see me as infrastructure, a silent service running in the background, Wi-Fi, plumbing, heat. When did that happen? When did the woman who raised a child become the woman who could be left off the guest list? The worst part was how quiet it had all been. No screaming, no dramatic fights, just a slow series of reclassifications. Don't worry, Mom, we've got it. This might not be your thing. Rachel's parents are coming, so maybe next time. And I had let it happen, because I didn't want to be the overbearing mother, because I thought I was giving them space, because I thought love meant stepping aside when asked, but stepping aside had turned into being stepped over. The next morning, I called the bank. It wasn't a big move, just a step. I asked them to send me the full list of automatic withdrawals from my accounts. Every debit, every linked card, every transfer. The woman on the phone was polite, but I could hear the surprise in her voice. Is something wrong, Mrs. Halstead? Yes, I wanted to say. Something is terribly wrong, but I just said, no, I'm doing a little cleaning. I printed everything out that afternoon. The stack was thicker than I expected. I highlighted every transaction linked to them. Daniel, Rachel, the children's school, the boutique. I ran a total. It was worse than I remembered. Then I made another list. What have they given me? Birthday card from the kids, digital. Mother's Day call. Last year, not this one. Christmas invitation, rescinded when Rachel's cousin extended their ski trip. Grandparent day at school. Don't worry, Rachel's mom will go. Rachel's mom will. No dinners, no movie nights, no surprise visits. They hadn't been to my house in almost 8 months. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and really looked at myself. 69 years old, silver hair in a loose bun, face softer than it used to be, but still kind. Still mine. I wasn't frail. I wasn't confused. I wasn't in anyone's way, but I was done. Done giving without being seen. Done shrinking so someone else could feel bigger. Done pretending that being excluded was something I had to swallow quietly. I reached for the envelope on my desk. The one with the power of attorney forms I had drawn up after George died. It was time to revoke Daniel's access. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted peace. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Daniel, not to Rachel, to myself. It was only one line. You are not just what you give. You are someone worth receiving. And I meant every word. I waited until Friday. I knew they'd be distracted. Daniel would be prepping for that client dinner at the firm, and Rachel would be knee-deep in planning her sister's birthday weekend. It was the perfect time to make the changes without the blowback coming immediately. I needed that buffer. Not for fear, but for strategy. Because once I pulled the thread, I knew the whole thing would unravel fast. I walked into the bank with my folder tucked under one arm and the letter to myself folded neatly into my purse. Linda, the branch manager, met me at the counter. She's known me for over 20 years. Watched me bring Daniel in for his first savings account. She once sent me flowers after George passed. When she saw the look on my face, she didn't ask questions. We sat in her office, and I laid the papers on the desk between us. I want to cancel all transfers to the Halstead household, I said calmly. Every single one. And I'd like to revoke Daniel's power of attorney. Linda blinked just once, then nodded. Understood. We worked silently for nearly an hour. She walked me through each transaction, each link, each automatic withdrawal. I crossed them off one by one. Then I signed the papers. My signature didn't shake. As we reached the last form, Linda paused. Are you sure? She asked gently. I looked at her. I'm tired, Linda, and I'm done being invisible. She nodded and slid the final form across the desk. With that signature, I closed a chapter. Not of motherhood, but of martyrdom. By the time I left the bank, the air felt different, lighter. I walked down Main Street to the cafe I used to love before I stopped going anywhere I couldn't afford to treat everyone. I ordered a cappuccino and a lemon tart. Sat by the window, watched the world go by. It was almost startling how quickly I felt like a person again. And then, of course, came the fallout. It started with a text on Saturday evening. Daniel, hey, Mom, did you forget the tuition payment? School just called. Said it bounced. No greeting, no warmth. Just alarm masked as entitlement. Me. No, I didn't forget. I left it at that. The next one came 10 minutes later. Daniel. Wait, what does that mean? Rachel. Martha, Netflix is saying the account is inactive. Can you just fix it? We have friends over. Daniel, again. Mom, the gas bill is unpaid. I'm on the phone with the bank. What's going on? I didn't answer. I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and a book in my lap, letting their panic build without me. Sunday morning, the knock came. Loud, fast, desperate. Daniel, in a suit wrinkled from sleep, eyes wild, phone clutched in one hand. Mom, he said, not even waiting to be invited in. The accounts are frozen. The mortgage bounced. The kids' school called again. Rachel's freaking out. What did you do? I gestured toward the living room. He didn't sit. He paced. They said you revoked everything. Is this a mistake? Did someone get into your account? No mistake, I said quietly. I closed the bank. He froze mid-step. The bank? I mean me, the bank of Mom. It's closed now. He stared at me like I'd spoken a different language. Why? He asked, voice cracking. I stood, walked to the sideboard, pulled out the folder, and handed it to him. This is why. He opened it. His eyes scanned the totals, the highlighted lines, the dates, the small notes I'd made in the margins just for myself. Christmas gift, she never said thank you. Boutique lease, second time this year. Car insurance again. Daniel swallowed hard. This isn't fair, he whispered. You offered. You never said no. I nodded. You're right, I didn't. And that's on me. But you never said it was too much. I looked him dead in the eyes. You never asked if it was. Silence. He sank into the chair like a deflated balloon, staring down at the evidence of his own blind comfort. I thought we were family, he said weakly. We are, I said. But I'm not a donor. And I'm not an employee. And I'm certainly not the help you only remember when the lights won't turn on. I never meant to hurt you. That made me smile. Sad, tired. It's not about what you meant, Daniel. It's about what you did. There it was. The shift. The first real one. I saw it in his eyes. Not defensiveness, not anger. Realization. Maybe too late. Maybe not. He stood slowly. Can we talk later? Of course, I said, when you're ready to listen. He nodded and left without another word. I sat down and picked up the folder again, smoothing the edges. There was one more copy to make. For Rachel. Rachel didn't knock. She never did. She let herself in the way she always had, heels clicking across the hardwood, her voice rising ahead of her like a perfume cloud. Martha, she called, sharp and bright. We need to talk, now. I was in the kitchen icing a lemon loaf. I didn't stop. She swept in like a gust of cold air in a designer wrap. Lipstick perfect, jaw clenched, the fury in her eyes doing little to mask the panic underneath. You've lost your mind, she said. I placed the loaf carefully on the cooling rack. Then I turned to face her. No, Rachel, I've just finally found it. She blinked, momentarily thrown. You can't just cut us off like this. You pay the mortgage, you handle the utilities, you always have. We made plans based on that. That was your first mistake, I said, folding the dish towel slowly. Assuming my generosity was permanent, assuming my help was an obligation. She scoffed. Oh, please, don't act like you're some martyr. You live in a paid off house. You're retired. You don't do anything. Ah, there it was. The truth slipping out, raw and unpolished. You're right, I said softly. I don't do anything for you anymore. Rachel crossed her arms, her body radiating offense. Daniel is devastated. You've put us in an impossible position. The kids are welcome at my house anytime, I said. But I won't be writing tuition checks for schools that teach them to treat their grandmother like a line item. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes narrowed. You're being emotional. I almost laughed. Yes, I am being emotional. For once. I walked to the drawer and pulled out a second folder, identical to the one I'd shown Daniel, but this one had an extra note stapled to the front. A brief summary I'd written in the middle of the night, when I couldn't sleep for the weight of it all. I handed it to her. She didn't take it. What's that? Your balance sheet. Rachel stepped back. Excuse me? Every dollar, every favor, every silent yes, it's all there, in case you need a reminder. She stared at it like it was radioactive. Then she snapped. You always wanted control. That's what this is about. No, I said calmly. This is about respect, which you've spent the last decade withdrawing from me like a limitless ATM. Her nostrils flared. And now, I continued, you're overdrawn. She looked like she might throw something. Instead, she turned and stormed toward the front door. I'll talk to Daniel, she snapped. He'll fix this. Daniel already knows, I said. And fixing it isn't his job anymore. Her hand froze on the doorknob. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, that the bank is closed. The door is locked. The furniture's been moved. And the woman you thought would always say yes isn't here anymore. For a long second, she didn't move. Then she opened the door and slammed it behind her. I stood there, hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally saying the things I had swallowed for too long. I sat down at the kitchen table and let the silence settle around me. It didn't feel lonely. It felt like space. Space I had earned. Later that week, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Grandma? It was Emily, my oldest granddaughter. Rachel and Daniel's eldest, 19 in college. Hi, sweetheart, I said gently. She was quiet for a moment. Mom and Dad are freaking out. I smiled faintly. I'm sure they are. She exhaled. Can I come over? I don't know whose side I'm supposed to be on. My heart ached a little at that. You don't need to pick sides, Emily, I said. You just need to come as you are. She came that night. She brought lasagna in a Tupperware container and a quiet, confused sadness that broke my heart. We sat in the kitchen and I told her the truth. Not to turn her against her parents, but because she deserved to see the shape of the silence that had held our family hostage. She listened. She asked questions. She read some of the folder. At one point, she looked up at me, tears in her eyes. Grandma, did we treat you that badly? I didn't answer right away, because I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to wound her either. So I said the truest thing I could. You forgot I was a person, that's all. She cried then, quietly, and I held her the way I used to when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. When she left, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for finally saying no." And that's when I knew. I hadn't just closed the bank. I'd opened a door. I didn't expect them all to show up. But that Sunday evening, just as the sun dipped low behind the elms, I looked up from my knitting and saw 3 silhouettes on my front walk. Daniel, Rachel, and Emily. Standing like a broken little tableau at the edge of a reckoning they didn't quite know how to begin. I didn't get up. I let them knock. Daniel opened the door slowly when I called out. It's unlocked. He looked older, not in years, but in weight. Like something had finally settled on his shoulders that had always belonged there. Mom, he said quietly, we want to talk. Rachel stayed by the doorway, arms folded like armor. Emily sat beside me without asking, just like she used to. I put down my yarn and looked up. I'm listening. Daniel started, but it was Emily who spoke first. Dad told me everything. Not just the money, but how you were treated by all of us. She glanced toward her mother. Rachel said nothing. Daniel cleared his throat. I was blind, Mom. I let it happen. I thought as long as you weren't saying anything, it was fine. I tilted my head. And now? I see you. 3 words. So simple. But after years of absence, they were thunder. I turned to Rachel. She flinched, just slightly. I shouldn't have said that about you not doing anything, she muttered. That was cruel. And the dinner? I asked gently. Rachel hesitated. It was supposed to be curated. I thought you'd make it awkward. Because I don't own a cocktail dress? I asked, letting the question hang. Rachel looked at the floor. Because you remind people we didn't build this life alone. Ah, there it was. Not just shame, but exposure. I did everything I thought a good mother was supposed to do, I said. I gave. I smiled. I let the slights pass. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. But good mothers aren't built for silence, that they're built for truth. Daniel sat down then, slow and heavy. His hand reached across the table, resting near mine but not touching. I want to fix this, he said. But I don't know how. You don't fix it, I said softly. You live differently. Rachel raised her eyes finally, and in them I saw something unfamiliar. Not warmth, not quite remorse, but humility, and that was enough. I don't need your apology, I said. Not really. What I needed was space. What I needed was to be heard. I looked to Emily, her eyes bright with quiet fire. And what I got was clarity, and a granddaughter brave enough to sit in the middle of it all and choose her own voice. Emily smiled then, a small, proud thing that made my heart ache. Daniel took a breath. We want you at the next dinner. No excuses, no sides. Just family. I paused, not because I didn't believe him, but because belief and trust are not the same thing. I'll think about it, I said. They stayed for tea. Rachel even helped clear the cups. Not perfectly, not graciously, but honestly. When they left, the house felt warmer somehow, but it wasn't just them. It was me. I stood at the window for a long time after they'd gone, watching the porch where I once stood, holding a lemon loaf no one wanted. A porch where I had once been told, without words, that I was no longer welcome. And now I knew better. Now, they hadn't exiled me. I'd exiled myself from my own dignity, one sacrifice at a time. Until finally, I remembered the cost. I wish I could tie it all up with a perfect bow. Say that everything is fine now, that love healed all. But real life is messier, and finer for it. What I can say is this: I no longer confuse love with self-erasure. I no longer equate motherhood with martyrdom. And I no longer let silence stand in for grace. If you're reading this and you've been waiting for permission to draw your line, to reclaim your space, to stop explaining why your dignity matters, take mine. You are not being difficult. You are being real, and that is enough. That is more than enough. Now I pour myself a cup of tea, return to my knitting, and let the quiet hold me. Not in exile, but in peace.